In 1987, Donald Trump released his book, The Art of the Deal, which served as something of a behind-the-scenes memoir detailing his business acumen and philosophy for success in entrepreneurial ventures. At the heart of his strategy, Trump relied on intensely focused goals while avoiding unnecessary distractions, as well as his now famous brand of aggressive, confident negotiation tactics. He emphasized visionary leadership and big thinking, as well as a strong dose of audacious, risk-taking pursuits. It was that sort of business approach that brought his net worth at its height in the 1980s to somewhere near $3 billion, according to Forbes. But his success was not destined to last forever. Due to a number of factors, Trump experienced substantial business losses in the late 80s and 90s that caused his net worth to plummet. A financial recession, combined with over-leveraged assets and debt accumulation that he was not able to service due to failing properties, meant that Trump would lose nearly $40 million per year starting in 1990 and 1991. Trump had purchased the Plaza Hotel in New York in 1988 for $407 million, but the real estate market had declined with the recession, hotel revenues plummeted, and he was unable to service the debt. Likewise, he had invested heavily in Atlantic City casinos, but those properties, which included the Trump Taj Mahal, Trump Marina, and Trump Plaza, were plagued by operational issues, poor management, and a downturn in the gaming industry. As a result, Trump's debt soared, his revenues fell, and he found himself in nearly catastrophic financial straits. It was also a matter of bad timing with the recession of the early 90s. A tanking economy meant that people weren't spending on luxury properties, which decreased their value. Likewise, the economy brought with it high interest rates, increasing the cost to service debt on his high-stakes properties. To top it off, Trump had overextended himself, as his struggling airline, Trump Shuttle, demonstrated. He bought the airline for $365 million in 1989, but by 1992 was forced to sell it for a fraction of the price that he'd paid. Adding insult to injury, Trump was maligned in the media for his high-profile legal and tax failures, thus greatly damaging his brand. To many, it seemed the golden boy of real estate development was finished. But that's where the Trump story truly begins. He worked relentlessly over the remaining years in the 90s to restructure his debts, sell off various properties, and strategically refinance where he could. He faced the failures of overexpansion head-on and instead of giving up, began to focus on his core assets that produced the most profit. Perhaps most importantly, he relied on his savvy public relations to remake his personal image. He worked closely with the media to reframe his story, not as a failed businessman, but as a casualty of an untimely and unpredictable economic downturn. He kept in the public eye, carefully crafting himself as a successful entrepreneur, living a lavish lifestyle. He cut costs aggressively in his businesses, made operational adjustments, and developed strategic investment partnerships that would allow him to return to the top. By the time he ran for president in 2016, Trump had increased his net worth to $4.5 billion. After a massive financial comeback, his net worth would make him wealthier than ever. What he proved, according to those who knew him best, was that he not only survived, but thrived in chaos. He was resilient, able to correct mistakes, and was wildly successful even as he overcame seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Oddly enough, Trump's career path in business has almost completely mirrored his political career. He overcame all odds, especially in the world of public opinion. Famously, Barack Obama, on the mean tweets portion of the Jimmy Kimmel Show, read a tweet from Donald Trump, where Trump said, quote, "President Obama will perhaps go down as the worst president in the history of the United States," end quote. And sorry for the bad Trump impression. With a smug look into the camera, the audience laughed, and Obama responded, "Well, at real Donald Trump, at least I will go down a president." Before the 2016 election, it was humorous to most political experts that the one-time host of NBC's The Apprentice would even stand a chance against Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential race. And yet, against all odds and expectations, Trump captured 306 electoral college votes to ascend to the White House. He appealed to frustrated Americans who wanted to see the swamp of Washington, D.C. drained. Trump pulled off the unthinkable. The New York Times had given Hillary Clinton an 85% chance of winning, but Trump still found himself in the Oval Office. However, his story was far from over. Trump's presidency was plagued by traitors within and hostile opponents without. He trusted the wrong cabinet members. He hadn't developed a deep bench of staffers, and he was ill-prepared for the challenges of government operations. Accusations of collusion with Russia persisted. He was impeached, and to cap things off, he was targeted by the justice system following his loss to Joe Biden in 2020 for the events that took place at the Capitol building on January 6th. Many of his colleagues would go to prison, including Steve Bannon. The country plummeted into chaos and economic downturn after the great shamdemic of 2020. Lawsuit after lawsuit was filed against him. His political career seemed finished, or so everyone thought. Most, including those on the Republican side, saw him as an absolute liability to the party. Then, on July 13th, 2024, while Trump was campaigning at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, shots rang out from a nearby building. Turning his head ever so slightly at the last moment, a bullet that would have ripped straight through his head instead nicked his ear, miraculously preserving his life. Several more shots hit members of the crowd behind him, killing Corey Compratore, age 50, a former fire chief in Butler Township. Despite the media's best efforts to memory hold the event, this is a moment that will never be forgotten. After getting hit, Trump was swarmed by Secret Service agents, but he fought through them and in a moment of audacious courage, stood up and shouted into the microphone, "Fight, fight, fight." The country was inches away from total chaos and perhaps a nearly certain civil uprising. It was the moment that changed American history forever. The bullet meant to kill him would turn him into a lionized national hero with the clear sense that he had a mandate from heaven. Trump would speak shortly after at the Republican National Convention, bandaged ear and all, and would accept the nomination from the party. He would narrowly escape an all-out assault from the weaponized Justice Department, as well as a second assassination attempt in Florida, and on November 5th would declare victory as President-elect of the United States of America. With the protection of God and a decisive victory at the polls, Trump would rise higher than he had before. If the election of 2016 mirrored the art of the deal, the 2024 election most certainly mirrored the art of the comeback. After Trump had won Pennsylvania by a wide margin and captured the swing state of Georgia, Fox News' Bret Baier rightly said that Donald Trump was the biggest political phoenix from the ashes story in the history of U.S. politics. Co-host Brit Hume added, "In the days after January 6th, I remember sitting there, I think with you, Brett, and I said, this guy Trump, he's radioactive. Republicans have turned against him. They want rid of him. He's an obstacle. He's a problem. And I don't think a political comeback by him was possible. And yet here we are. He's the toughest son of a gun I've ever seen, ever. I mean, all he's had thrown at him, I would be in an insane asylum." End quote. While some states are still counting at the time of this recording, Trump appears to have captured the election in resounding fashion. It appears he will again surpass 300 electoral college votes and capture the popular vote by more than 5 million votes. A political phoenix indeed. Here's the thing, Trump couldn't and didn't do it alone. After the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempts, a large number of America's best and brightest rallied to Trump, including Elon Musk. When asked why he did, Musk told Tucker Carlson on election night that it was, above all, Trump's courage to stand and fight for America that compelled him to join forces. He realized what was at stake. Musk also told Joe Rogan in an interview just a few days before the election that if Kamala won, it would be the last Democratic election in U.S. history. Speaking of Rogan, Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance found a way to reach the American people through alternate media platforms, thus delegitimizing and weakening the long-held power of the legacy media. Where did the idea to lean on podcasters like Rogan and Thiel come from, you may wonder? According to Trump, it was from his son Barron, the 6'7", 18-year-old who himself has become something of a dark MAGA celebrity among Gen Z supporters and right-wing Anon accounts. There really couldn't have been a Trump victory without Tucker Carlson's network. which wouldn't have happened unless he was first fired from Fox News, as he was in October of 2023. And Tucker's platform wouldn't have exploded unless it had a place to thrive, which is where Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter, now X, comes into the story. While Twitter helped secure Biden's victory in 2020 by suppressing what it considered right-wing disinformation and promoting the left's narrative, by the time 2024 rolled around, X had become the last bastion of free speech and a mighty weapon for defeating legacy outlets. Along the way, we found out that the CIA tried to kill Tucker, was tapping his phone, and many similar threats were made against Elon Musk for supporting Trump. What lessons can be learned from this truly strange and providential epoch in American history? First, leaders must be dealers in hope. It was Napoleon Bonaparte, the great French general, who rightly said as much, but it was Trump who showcased such character before the watching eyes of the world. By all accounts, Trump rose to power a second time because he never gave up hope for America, not in the face of lawsuits, assassination attempts, and constant slander in the media. It was his courageous refusal to accept the odds, as well as his war cry of fight, 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 that drew other courageous and competent men like Elon Musk to rally to him. If we learn anything from this moment, it's that men don't follow titles, they follow courage. Speaking of which, the leaders of the former Big Eva went all in on the left and Kamala Harris, and they should be rightly rejected as illegitimate voices in the new Christian right movement. David Platt, Ron Burns, Ray Ortland, Russell Moore, David French, and many others have no credibility remaining. Who will rise to take their place? What kind of men will they be? If this election has taught us anything, they must be men of courage who posit a hopeful vision for building and doing great things in the future. They must be audacious men like St. Patrick and St. Boniface, who conquered lands, spread the gospel, confronted kings, chopped down oaks of idolatry, and inspired great men like Charlemagne, king and emperor of the Christian West. Second, it takes a tribe of great men, not just a great man, to accomplish great things. Trump's victory would have been impossible without the help of Elon, Tucker, Peter Thiel, Dana White, vote recruiter Scott Pressler, and many more hands on deck. Yet again, we're reminded that you can't get anything done without coalitions. You've got to work across differences, unite around a common goal, and work together. If Christendom is to be rebuilt, the brother wars have to stop, and further, meaningful coalitions must arise between Christian boroughs. Gondor and Rohan must be united with Rivendell and the kingdom of the dwarves. Now, if you're prone to purity spiral, this strange providence will surely ruffle your feathers. Elon's first 5 children were conceived via IVF, and the last through surrogacy. Thiel and Pressler are both homosexuals, and Dana White, CEO of the UFC, is hardly singing in the church choir. Meanwhile, many evangelicals sat out the election because of Trump's abortion policies. Because despite working to overturn Roe v. Wade, Trump did not run on a significantly pro-life ticket in 2024. As a result, many evangelicals won't be a part of the new movement, largely because of their own choice. For the rest of us, we think this represents a remarkable opportunity to get involved, have our voices heard, and work with the new administration as much as we're able. We need political and economic coalitions if we're going to rebuild our towns, churches, and nation. Third, the future belongs to young right-wing men. As Eric Correlesa pointed out in Time magazine after the election, the voter turnout for young men was shockingly high. Trump won 42% of men ages 18 to 29, and he did it thanks to a strategy implemented by Alex Brusewitz, a 27-year-old white male who encouraged Trump to make a podcast run with guys like Theo Vaughn and Joe Rogan. According to Time, Trump's campaign strategy was to target young men who mostly interacted with politics through edgy bro podcasts and social media. In July, campaign manager Susie Wiles tasked a 27-year-old with spearheading Trump's podcast circuit, Alex Brusewitz. Maybe more shocking, when Brusewitz attempted to get approval for the podcast strategy, Trump told him to call Barron for his input and sign-off. By appealing to young men, Trump won. Compare that to the way most evangelical leaders treat young men on social media today. Typically, those young men are berated for playing video games, listening to Andrew Tate, or going to the gym. If you laugh at the right kind of meme or the wrong kind of meme, you could be the target of excommunication and ostracism. You're scolded for enjoying White Boy Summer or reading alternative histories about World War II or other historical events. A good word for how many churches and prominent platforms think about young men today might be disdain. And with every stroke of the keyboard, such leaders do what they can to alienate young men, especially young white men, who get labeled as Nazis, fascists, and racists. But as Trump proved, this is a foolish strategy if you want to attract fighters for the coming culture war. Instead of constantly attacking young white men, a new breed of leader has to emerge who relates with them, gets in their corner, and addresses their concerns. Now, it's not about pandering, but it is about winning their hearts, giving them a greater mission, and making sure they don't end up as a generation of lost boys without a future. As a boomer, Trump demonstrated that older generations of leaders can be flexible, listen, and make adjustments that account for a powerful new demographic of right-wing men. It's not at all inevitable that older men have to live up to the okay boomer stereotype. It's time church leadership and media platforms within Christendom learn this lesson as well. Fourth and finally, it's no time to blackpill, but to build. After the victory had been declared on election night, Elon Musk kept telling Tucker Carlson that this was an exciting time for America and that he was working to bring about a new golden age in U.S. history. Talk about bold ambition. Yes, the deep state and political machine had come after him. He acknowledged it, but he didn't fixate on it. While certain Christian camps kept blackpilling, Elon was calling on great Americans to start rebuilding. On X, he shared a photo of his SpaceX rocket at ignition saying, quote, "The future is going to be fantastic," end quote. In truth, there's never been a better time to start building. If, Lord willing, Elon gets his wish to head the new Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, and he starts eliminating government agencies as promised, the restraints on economic growth are going to be destroyed. The future belongs to the innovators, the builders and businessmen who have the nerve to sail across oceans, start new ventures, and build their Christian boroughs in the spirit of the age of exploration. The leaders in cities that win in the next 4 years are going to be those with bold plans, big visions, and a renewed sense of the Puritan work ethic. Yes, the vibe has shifted. Thanks, Santiago. But do you have what it takes to capitalize? Yes. The new Trump-Vance administration is friendly to the Christian right, but will you take a seat at the table or will you abstain? The future is going to be fantastic. We think, especially, it's going to be fantastic here in Ogden. It's time to build. The King's Hall podcast exists to make self-ruled men who rule well and win the world.
Well, gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the King's Hall podcast, brought to you, Brian, in Trump's America.
This is Trump's America. What this means, what this election means, is that Ben and Pastor Griffin and I, a couple of us, we went for a walk around the block yesterday, and we basically, any house that had a rainbow flag, we now legally own.
We own them.
That's what it means. This is Trump's America.
Trump's America. Dan, welcome to the show. It's good to have you back.
Where was I?
You've been gone.
It's been 2 episodes you haven't been on.
Are you serious?
Yeah, last 2.
Wait, and you guys were? Where was I?
Me and Ben did the Rise and Fall of Constantinople. Eric and I did the intro to the Adam Madden interview.
Where was I?
You were gone?
I wasn't here?
No, you weren't even here.
Well, what's ironic is that I was supposed to be duck hunting this morning.
And we were like, we have to do it today.
Pressing matters, though. We had a huge election.
Yeah, that's true. But the thing is,
one of the biggest in my lifetime, I think.
The ducks are still flying right now. And here I am
and you're thinking
in a basement.
Dan, your home state of Wisconsin actually came through this time around.
Praise God. I mean,
there was no 3 a.m. vote drop.
Nope.
I think that got shut down this year. Trump is the president-elect. So I kind of want to start with that. I was driving to work the morning after we had found this out, stayed up all night, right, watching Trump speak. And I saw like the snow-capped peaks of the Wasatch Front. and it was like a pink sky with the sunrise.
Glory.
And all creation was just singing, I think is what was happening. I felt different. There was a different vibe, okay? Not to be too hyperbolic about this, Brian.
Yeah.
But I've talked to a lot of people who are kind of in that same mood of like, there has been a real, weight that's lifted. It feels a little bit like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where you're looking around and things are thawing. Mm-hmm. People have talked about the spell breaking, Sauron's eye crashing down. There's a lot of work to do, but I guess just describe why for people this moment is so pivotal.
Well, it's so funny because there's like two reactions to what you just said. And we had a similar thing with, I walked in a chapel and I'm leading chapel at St. Brendan's this week, teaching. It's like, 5-10 minute little mini homily. We sing, we pray, and then they go to class. And usually we start with a call and response where whoever's leading, whichever one of the pastors, will say, "Welcome to another day at St. Brendan's." And their students all respond super loud, "A gift from the Lord." Well, before I can even get to that, I'm finding my spot in the passage. Like the little kids start chanting, "Trump, Trump, Trump."
That's great.
And I said that on Twitter, and everyone's like, "Idolatry."
Did you call them to repent?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, guys, read the room. Look, it's okay to celebrate a civic victory, even if it's not the ultimate eschaton. It's not the ultimate eschatological victory where Christ returns with the sound of the trumpet blast.
Nobody's
and all of
claiming
the
that.
rights will be made wrong. And no, but it is a real civic victory. So for me, when the weight you're describing lifted, that like I fell asleep with my phone in my hand, which I never do, and woke up, and I still hadn't seen the full. It was like 99%, but then I got up at 4 a.m. and I was like, "Oh, praise God!" And there was a weight, and it was just you think about issue after issue where we were faced as a nation with a fork in the road toward possibly the end of elections, with completely catastrophic illegal immigration solidified for another 4 years. Those immigrants turned into voters, Democrat voters. And you just start going down the line, transing of kids and the transgender issue continuing to be exploded. Maybe abortion codified at the federal level. Like the Supreme Court justices, maybe 1 to 3 getting placed by a Kamala Harris. And you start looking at that, and then you look at the fork to the right with Trump winning, a Trump Vance ticket. And the thing that struck me was just not only what a mercy for our nation, for all of those issues and more, but also just tremendous divine providence, in my view, in making all of us walk through one of the hardest roads to this. Instead of winning in 2020, being declared the winner, at least in 2020, Trump experienced all of the lawfare, all of the weaponized Department of Justice, all of the nonsense, the assassination attempts, and some of the lessons that I think he would have learned lightly, he's now learned deep in his core. And so now we have a Trump with those lessons ingrained, and we have
much better staff behind him.
JD Vance instead of Mike Pence, and et cetera, and et cetera. So, I mean, there's so much that we could say, but it was just, I was very thankful to the Lord. And
it's not only Trump that's been through that, right? Mm-hmm. The last 4 years, but I was talking to my wife last night, and I was like, these last 4 years have been hell. Think about when Biden came into office. Mm-hmm. It was in the middle of this, shandemic, masking all the vaccine stuff. We've got a lot of military people that come to the church that are members of the church. And so we're writing vaccine religious exemptions.
Careers destroyed.
Yeah, careers destroyed. Yep. Yeah, people losing their jobs. You don't know what's going to happen. And then that kind of goes by the wayside, and a lot of the oppression still exists. And then the economic downturn, in rapid inflation, and people are making less money now than 50 years ago. The quality of living is degrading, and so the last 4 years have been absolutely horrible. But also as a gift from God, because we've had to go through this too. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just Trump. We've all experienced this. We've all seen how bad it can really go if we let up. Yep. If we don't keep pressing, if we don't keep building, then this is how bad it could get. Because then you look at the trajectory and you're like, if we have 4 more years of this, what is the world going to look like? Mm-hmm. It'll look like a hellscape is what it'll look like.
Sending hundreds of billions of dollars to foreign powers, to Ukraine. And what new wars could we start in 4 more years? It's just, That's such a good point that it wasn't just the leaders that went through it, it was the people.
Yeah.
Which is why I think you see such historic shifts in voter demographics. Hispanic men turning out 20% stronger for Trump than in 2020, or maybe even more than that. Demographics that historically had been lockstep for Democrats no matter what.
I mean, politicians and churches were politicking essentially by pandering to women. And that, because that was the main voter block, that was the rising voter block, especially with education, college level education, and with the workforce increasing to women. What we saw was a massive shift back to masculinity, I think, is what we're seeing as the rise of men.
Yep.
Well, it was interesting too. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but you had record turnout for 18 to 29-year-old men. I think Trump won almost 50% of that demographic, which is insane. Working men, even people on, as Trump calls it, MSDNC, they're crying about it, and they're like,
so funny.
All the college-educated people voted for Kamala Harris in large number. It's the working men who just, they're the ones who just damaged America and brought back communism, the fascism. So it's interesting to see that demographic shift, I think. But also, as you look at, Dan, you talked about what we all had to live through in the last 4 years. This morning, I got up and I saw on X, Trump has released a video, and he said all government programs for transgenderism and the chemical castration and the psychological torture of our children, it's ending. Like day one, I'm putting a stop to all of this. And what a weight off that he's coming out and saying, no, boys are going to be boys again, girls are going to be girls. These men masquerading as women, you're not going to be in locker rooms. What a relief that's coming crashing down.
Matt Walsh said something, I think it was today or yesterday, about how, and he's been fighting at the front lines on the trans issue with his documentaries and his show for quite a while, and doing a tremendous job on the propaganda war. When he saw that, he was like, this is the capstone of the cresting of the wave where it's turned. Now, America, if you see the turnout and the two platforms, the way they ran, even the Democrat platform has been distancing itself from the trans issue because the cultural shift, the backlash is enormous against these things. Normal, ordinary Americans are starting to look at these things and see them for what they are, which is a demonic death cult bent on the destruction of civilization. Well, they're starting to see these things.
They use government bureaucracy to shove it down people's throats too. And that's why it's so encouraging when you see, anytime I log into X and it's like, the FDA is going to be changing a whole bunch of, essentially gutting all of these non-essential or even damaging nutrition programs. And you have different things like talking about the American military intelligence, the CIA and the FBI and the talks about gutting those or removing a lot of them, all of the government bureaucracy. Something interesting, I can't remember the specific data, but for some decades now, we've added essentially 2 government agencies a year, bureaucratic agencies a year. And in these decades, we have removed 0.
Unbelievable.
And so we're so overweight with government bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And it really, we really felt the effects sharply during the shamdemic when the Department of Health, you had local departments of health and things like that. They were essentially in charge. Like they had they were able to stamp whatever they wanted.
What's interesting too, we're getting reports that Thomas Massey and Joel Salatin are going to be involved with the USDA, which would be remarkable.
Let's go.
You've got RFK, who's going to be involved with some of the health stuff. You've got Elon Musk with DOGE. First of all, DOGE, come on.
These are some of our friends, like John Moody, good friends with Joel Salatin and Thomas
Massey actually follows me on Twitter.
Yeah, and probably the greatest statesman right now, like in his position. It's just like there's probably no equal to him, and he's friends with John Moody, who's one of the most based Christians you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
So you start to look at these changes, and the things I'm seeing, I'm literally looking at them and thinking, it's like I'm dreaming, and I'm having a dream where Joel Salatin and Thomas Massey are going to be, and RFK, some of RFK stuff as well, is going to be taking on big agriculture, big pharma,
seed oils.
These are things that I didn't think we were within 20 years of touching.
What?
And all of a sudden, within months.
I think that's part of the backlash.
I thought it would remain on the fringe forever on remote Twitter accounts that I follow. And by the way, everybody in our space seems to take anonymous Twitter accounts, health advice over medical doctors, which is really funny. But now those people are actually in power, and they're going to be. So back to Trump's cabinet and all of the different people that he had in his bureaucracy, essentially. All of those people were removed. And he even admitted like those were bad choices. He didn't know what he was doing there. It was new to him. And so having this cabinet full of absolutely amazing men is very exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine the world, what it's going to look like in 3 years. When a lot of these government agencies, their power is removed, budgets are balanced. He's made some huge promises about income tax. Because the middle class are the only people who pay income taxes. I don't want to derail us too much, but what is the world going to look like when you go to Walmart and there's raw milk on the shelves? There's no seed oils allowed, no red 40, no yellow 5. Like your people are getting healthier. There's no vaccines mandated for birth of children.
Yeah, we're not
autism rates and just mental retardation and cognitive developmental issues are on the decline. Average lifespan increases, infant mortality rates start to drop. Like, what is
Healthcare
the world going to look like?
Down.
I can't even imagine this. This is why I'm so excited, is because it's beyond what I could have ever hoped for.
Well, hey there, cosmonauts. Big news from Haunted Cosmos for you.
That's right, guys. Our book, Haunted Cosmos, Doing Your Duty in a World That's Not Just Stuff, is finally available for pre-order.
And we would have it to you. I mean, like pre-order, I know it's going to get there in time for Christmas, probably shipping in like first or second week in November or so. We would have had it to you sooner, but something happened.
That's right, guys. Honestly, the Fae stole all of our books.
Stole it. They whole shipment.
I don't know what to tell you.
And here's the thing. They told us that they would give it back to us. So it's not all lost.
That's right.
But they told us that the only condition upon which they will return this entire first run of the book is if each of you per household buys 10 copies of the book.
Yeah, look, honestly, folks, we don't make the rules. Okay?
The Fae make the rules.
They sent us a ransom note. It was written in fairy handwriting. There was even little bits of like Bigfoot hair.
Fur on the envelope.
Yeah, on the envelope. So we know it's legit. And that's what they said. That's what they said. So unless you want all the books to be lost forever, you'll buy 10 of them today.
That's right.
So go to newchristendompress.com/haunted. God dang it.
What Ben meant to say was head to newchristendompress.com/cosmos and pre-order your copy today.
Guys, order a book today
to keep the Fae away. Yeah, just politically speaking, these are all, and again, like there's a temptation for Christians to be like, it's not the eschaton, so I'm not going to celebrate. But I'm looking at these things and going, how could you not be celebrating all of these potential civic wins? And one of the big lessons that I'm glad to see this as a strong core part of the message, not only from people in the new right pressuring the Donald Trump and Vance and his team, but also from their own internal signaling. They get that this is not a moment to now stop and signal peace with the left.
Right.
This is a moment to turn a victory into a rout. This is a moment to do the King Alfred. He learned that if he let the Vikings retreat and they just stay on the field, they beat him on the field, and then they let the Vikings retreat. If you don't follow them and put to sword every single enemy soldier that is retreating, they'll regroup, they'll come back and kill you tomorrow. And I finally think the right is getting this. You have to press your advantage.
Yeah, I think that's part of the appointments too, with RFK, with Elon Musk, is recognizing once you're at this point, there's been a victory on the field, so to speak, as Brian pointed out. You have to press the attack. And one of the ways that you do this is you have to actually go and work within the wheels of government and change policy.
Yes.
And you're going to need the people who do that. I also think it's strategically effective. Think about how many young moms were probably won by the RFK addition to the ticket. I mean, because, even people kind of on the left, the Jenny McCarthy's of the world, like that drum has been beat for a long time on vaccines, what they're doing, children's health. You've got a lot of people in the adjacent Joel Salatin world, and they are not all conservatives, but they care about, the atrazine, right? They care about Monsanto. So I think I see that changing. I also thought this was interesting. This is David Sachs, and he had a post on X, Why Trump Won. Just a brief quote from it. He says, while the legacy media creates excuses and impugns the motives of voters to explain why Trump won, the reason is simple. Trump is the candidate who spoke to voters' concerns directly. I mean, you didn't really find any substance, I think, from the Harris campaign.
Kamala Harris has a godlike gift for saying 500 words and it having absolutely no informational content whatsoever. I mean, she's like the LeBron James. She's like the Tiger Woods in his prime. She's like the, the Eric Kahn of transitions, of bad transitions. Like, she is that level of gifting at just speaking for 5 to 65 minutes and saying absolutely nothing. And the thing is, the delegitimization of the media, and like Elon's right when he says you are the media now, when you get just even a crack in the door to free speech on X, what happens is that people begin to see, even people who had genuinely been deceived and like, oh yeah, they believed everything the media said about Trump. They believed everything that the media said about the godlike abilities of the Democrat leaders of Biden and Kamala. And then they see Biden get up on that debate stage, and then they actually start to see Kamala and hear her speak. And then they see Trump on Joe Rogan for 3 hours. And they see JD Vance before hostile reporters being calm and polite and respectful and absolutely embarrassing them. And normal people start to see, we've been had. These are evil idiots who are running the country. And actually those right wingers, man, I don't like everything, but they actually, at least they're making sense.
Yeah, these are the kind of issues of the day. I also think this becomes problematic, and Dan, I want to get your thoughts. You have the response of the old regime that's dying in evangelicalism, and these were the issues that they actually also refused to address. And so you're seeing as the right ascends, the pietism, you've got stuff like this from John Piper. He said, presidential election results, having delivered us from one evil, God now tests us with another. And you could see all the pastors even responding to him and being like, John, why? Why does it have to be this way? So I think, as Brian, you mentioned in the cold open, there seems to be, they understand that they're losing power. And because they're losing authority, people don't trust them. They're not speaking on the issues that people really care about. The pietism is not going to hold the barbarians off. So I want to get your thoughts, particularly about Christian leadership. A lot of Christian leaders, I think, failed the test when it came to resonating with the actual issues of particularly like young Christian right-wing men. Your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think if you contrast our limited success or people that are in our camp, the success that we've all had versus Big Eva, you'll see some stark differences. One of the main reasons that people actually listen to our stuff, that one of the main compliments that people in our church give, especially Pastor Sauvé with his preaching, is that we're very direct and we give action. So we go through the scriptures, you exposit the text, and then you say, therefore, in light of this, you should do this or stop doing this. It's very specific, very direct. If you look at Big Eva, though, they operate much like the old political regime where it's big tent. In a lot of ways, you're just going to try to rock the boat as little as possible and attract as many people as possible. And that's the principle. And so you can see how that's applied versus, ironically, with what we've been doing based on our principles of just expositing the text and telling people to live in light of it. That's kind of what is happening in this new right wave in politics, is that Trump's actually speaking to the issues.
That's right.
People are actually being direct. That's why JD Vance has become so popular, is because he can articulate very clearly and very directly in a very he's competent. He's a real smart guy. Very specific things that need to be done, very specific actions. I think RFK is really good at this as well. When he starts talking about atrazine or yellow 5, I watched a video where he's talking about yellow 5. I can't remember what the chemical compound is called. He's like, oh, this was derived from coal. And it was a sludge, a waste byproduct, and they started using it to dye fabrics. And they're like, why not food? We'll make M&Ms, yellow M&Ms out of this coal sludge. They now use petroleum to do it. But anyway, it's the specifics. People have felt they have real needs. They have real struggles. And finally, somebody is actually talking to them about that. And that's where I think the tools just don't exist for a lot of the more pietistic leaning old guard, is because they took on so much of this idea of the post-World War II theory of like, hey, we just need to be as big as possible. You can see that in every sphere of the world, every sphere of government and of ruling is like, let's be kind through not offending anyone at all, and make sure that it's as vanilla and whitewashed as possible. And that's why I think where you're losing. Is because it can only last for so long because it's a facade.
It's just a skim of paint deep.
Yeah.
When you poke Kamala Harris or the Democrats or Joe Biden,
Somebody like Mike Pence, let's be honest.
Let's be honest. Joe Biden actually wasn't always like this. He used to be quite competent in speaking off his feet with some depth and knowledge to issues even 20 years ago. But the current state of affairs is that you poke them and it's skin deep. You run into the bedrock of nothingness. But when you get a J.D. Vance or an RFK or you get a Trump, they can go deep on issues. They care about them. And what's funny about it is that it's almost like we've circled back to a previous era of politics in a very modern kind of coded way. But if you think back to the Lincoln Douglas debates and that sort of era of politics, the standard would be you have very little mass media. It's not quick. There's no over the air, listening on a radio or anything at this point. And so Lincoln Douglas, they would travel around from population center to population center, and they would do the Lincoln Douglas debates. Formal debates are now styled after this style of debate that lasted hours, sometimes 6 to 8 hours. They would take a break and come back and do more hours of off-the-cuff debate about all of the issues of the day, both candidates demonstrating massive depth in their ability to understand the issues and speak to them. Well, what's happened now is that at first you had the amusing yourself to death, Neil Postmanization of media, where everything went TV. And TV is by its nature quick and propagandist, and it has very little depth by design. Postman would say, like, you watch a 20-minute news broadcast and genuinely ask yourself, what have I learned? And you find that you've learned very little, but you've been directed towards very specific actions that are basically propagandist. Now,
don't you think the podcast kind of changes this?
Well, now when you have a swing in terms of technology towards decentralized and long-form content like podcasts are powerful because they're not built around visual, which means that people interact with them differently. It's very difficult to sit down in front of a screen and watch 3 to 6 hours of someone just talking, but it's not difficult at all to do that with 3 to 6 hours of podcast content while you go about your life, or even 20 to 50 hours of audiobook content as you go about your life. So there's been a depth because of decentralized, information-driven technology that has led to a shift in not only the type of discourse that drives political, cultural, even religious currents, but that also sorts differently for the types of people that are going to rise in those media elements. Instead of the really nice looking guy that can read from a teleprompter really well, and he can get 3 minutes of good copy out of him, but he has very little depth in himself, the podcast long form content, it actually sorts and selects for higher competence. So now we're going to see a new class of political elites arise who actually have to be able to be measured against the standard of this new form of rising information delivery and discourse. So you can no longer hide behind the shine and gleam of the television-driven media. You actually now have to be able to stand up to the off-the-cuff depth in yourself, ability to sit. And I'm telling you, like, not many people have done hours-long interviews with hostile to semi-hostile interlocutors or interviewers even Tim Pool's, I did the Tim Pool show recently, The Culture War. It was pretty friendly, and it wasn't, nobody was trying to destroy anybody on that. But even for that one issue, I had to spend 20 or 30 hours studying to be able to sit in a chair for 2 hours.
Yeah, you can't just go in with talking points.
Totally
and hope
different.
That's going to carry water.
Completely different. Now take that, and that's just one little thing. Take a J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, these guys. They're going to be queried about 50 to 100 different issues in 3 hours. And what's happening in America is that even amongst centrists, people are starting to select for statesmen who can withstand that sort of inquiry from memory. So there's a competence hierarchy that's being reshuffled that's very important to understand. Media companies need to understand this. Pastors need to understand this. We need to understand this as we relate to media, is that it's actually quite a gift. It's quite a gift because we're going to see media, instead of sorting for incompetence and glamour, it's more and more going to sort, I hope, that we'll continue to see this trend for competence.
I'm just curious what you think. So you just talked about long form media competence, but there's another side of that that's obviously rising, and that's like anonymous autistic meme lords,
short form,
and then hype videos.
Yes.
I mean, come on.
What you're seeing there is that, so you have logos, which is just the rationality of discourse and debate. You need that. But you also need ethos and pathos. So you go back to like when debates began to be televised publicly, political debates. And there was the famous one, I think is it JFK?
It's JFK, Nixon.
And Nixon.
And Nixon looked terrible.
People that watched it said that JFK won. People that listened to it on the radio said that Nixon won. So you need, if you can bring them all together, logos, ethos, pathos, you can be powerful. And the other thing that's very powerful about the new dissident right and the new Christian right and a lot of these is that we tend to understand this form of media where it can't stand alone. You can't have all pathos and all ethos. You have to have logos behind it. You need to have depth that once they get through the hype video, once they get through basically the cry to war and the call to hope and the being a dealer in hope and being able to destroy your enemies and put them to open shame and mock them and defeat them. You have to have the depth beyond it to stand long haul.
Yeah.
But leaders have to recognize the power of short form, heart winning media just as much as long form, mind winning media. And there's bleed between these two, but I just think this is one of the most significant shifts that's probably not being fully appreciated in what we've seen with Trump and Vance and the rise of the new right, is that a lot of the driving force, particularly of the last 4 years, has been the explosion of hundreds of millions of people regularly and routinely interacting with long-form audio content.
Yeah, I think this is a great example for Trump. We'll talk about it in a minute, but with his business stuff, of his ability to adjust. Like learn a lesson, adjust. I think it's just good, for leaders to think through that. Maybe you make mistakes, but you learn from them. You pivot when you need to.
The Proverbs say the soul of the lazy one craves and gets nothing, but the soul of the diligent is made prosperous. With the aim of diligence, I realized I needed help navigating the world of tax efficiency and investment strategy. Time and knowledge were barriers to these issues. I could either be lazy and merely crave knowledge of these things, or utilize someone specializing in tax and investment and life insurance strategies. That's why I work with Joe Garrissy at Backwards Planning Financial. His guidance empowers me to make informed financial decisions and helps me to be diligent with my finances. Joe works with one of the world's largest and most trusted financial service companies. He will customize a plan for your specific needs. Visit backwardspanningfinancial.com. That's backwardspanningfinancial.com, or call 615-767-2555 to speak with Joe to prepare for the future.
Oh, yes.
Hey, Dan, what are you doing?
I'm just checking my mutual funds and my stock portfolio.
Mutual funds, stock portfolio? What, did Dave Ramsey tell you to do that?
Maybe. Why?
How's your return looking so far this year?
Well, they just did come out with a unemployment numbers, and they're a little higher or lower than I thought.
Ooh. Well, have you ever thought about diversifying your portfolio into things like silver and gold?
I mean, yeah, I guess.
Well, gold and silver are having pretty good years. I mean, gold is up 20% in the last 12 months.
20%?
Yeah. Have you ever thought of investing in it?
I hadn't. How would I do that?
Really good question. Just go over to the guys at Alpine Gold. They're right here in Ogden. They're members of Refuge Church, the church that you pastor. You should know this. If you give Alpine Gold a call, they'll talk you through the steps of how to move your TradFi mutual funds and even things like IRAs into precious metals that you can use to start building durable wealth.
That sounds great.
Call Alpine Gold today or go to alpinegoldogden.com. Again, that's alpinegoldogden.com, and link is in the description below.
America is built on the backs of hardworking blue-collar Americans. That's why we're so excited to join forces with MaxD Trailers, a Texas-based and family-owned company, to bring you this episode. We're proud to partner with MaxD to see the vision of New Christendom established, one small business at a time. MaxD builds innovative, hardworking trailers for the builders, fixers, and growers of the world. You can follow their stories by checking out MaxD Trailers on Instagram or by visiting the link in the show notes. Learn more about MaxD Trailers by visiting maxdtrailers.com, where you can check out the article, 10 Ways to Make Money with Your Trailer. One of the things that also interests me, Dan, is the coalition that arose to surround Trump and ensure victory, which is, it's ironic because that's not exactly the coalition. If I was praying for the Lord to raise up leaders to deliver America from the leftist hell, that's maybe not the people that I would think. But I'm driven back to like the scene in Batman where Robin's kind of learning what went on in the final movie. And the Commissioner Gordon tells him, he says, you guys did all these things that were kind of like shady or whatever. And he says, would that you had a friend that would get his hands dirty for you. And these guys did some really hard work that's not glamorous. You had Elon Musk in Pennsylvania with Scott Pressler. I've actually kind of gotten into it with Scott before on Twitter about the length of hair discussion years ago. But this guy went out and he's a Republican vote getter, and he got the Amish mobilized, and they win Pennsylvania in record number. The guy's a homosexual. And yet we see a lot of number of Christians who are like, I'm sitting this one out. Nobody's perfect enough for me. There's some purity spiraling going on. But I think, Dan, what I'm getting at is there's something in here about what it takes to build a coalition and get things done politically. And I'm just wondering why so many Christians can't do it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We see this a lot in Protestantism, especially. We've talked about this before, especially in our episode, See No More Brother Wars. That's really where a lot of these ideas come from, is that it seems like the closer somebody gets to you, the harder it is to get along with them. And so we are so used to doing this independently, every part of life. And so the idea that you would go even so far as really the coalition that Trump built around him is probably icky. It's gross. But when you really look at what's happening from the outside, it's crazy, the bedfellows that Trump has really attracted, in his cabinet that he's forming, because you really have this strong rightward movement. And I appreciate the abolitionists. Like, hey, I'm no more abortion, like no more Molech worship. Like, I'm all here for it. And I think the trajectory that we're going is that direction.
It's more likely to produce that.
It is more likely to produce that than to do nothing, to sit on your hands. I think that this is definitely going in that trajectory. Is it even hard to imagine that that's the direction we're going? I mean, especially just looking at past performance, Trump was never really a strong anti-abortion candidate, pro-life candidate. And yet, through his leadership, Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's not a popular topic to talk about, and he is a politician. And so I can't imagine having that many based Christians, reformed guys that he's going to be surrounding himself with, and the trajectory that guys like Tucker Carlson are on, that you would not have these sorts of topics addressed. Just the overall movement is a movement in the direction of righteousness.
But I think it's not going to be. It's not going to be if we say, no, this is.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right.
To John Piper's point, this is an evil. I've got to keep my purity.
If a large group of people say, You're utterly evil. You're indistinguishable from the civilization destroying evil of the left, and I will not support you whatsoever. That candidate will then go and seek the support of people who will elect him.
Yeah.
So that is what we're going to see, unfortunately, with the decline in evangelical support, which there's arguments to be made that some of it has to do with unforced errors on the right in abortion and some of these issues for certain. However, I do think it's important to say, as we're looking at the abortion issue, that like many of these other skin deep issues on the left, when you actually bring into the light and debate the facts, you realize that there's termites eroding the foundation of the pro-death position, where it can't stand up to public scrutiny. If you actually had a debate that was 3 hours long between the best opponent of abortion and the best proponent of abortion, the opponent of abortion would win cleanly because he happens to have truth on his side. It doesn't matter how eloquently you argue that 6 divided by 2 equals 17. The answer is still 3, right? So
I had to do the math.
You had to do the math. When you look at this issue, it's one that I think I sense in J.D. Vance even a discomfort with the platform. And fundamentally, I think it's tied to this issue because J.D. Vance is a very intelligent man, and he is very committed to the rhetoric of logos, pathos, ethos. He's very good at that. So when he's having to debate a position that's fundamentally incoherent, which the current right position on abortion is fundamentally incoherent, that it's, we don't want extreme bans on abortion. What? We don't want extreme bans on first degree murder. We only want like partial ones. It's an incoherent position. And so my position is that we get far more maneuvering room because there genuinely is not an analogy between the left and the right currently. It really is the party of the destruction of civilization and the upending of all of the laws of nature, or at least to a far significant degree, more significant degree, reason. So that's why I think long term, if you have a party that wins on reason, over time, that party will align more and more, provided you have the right inputs and the right sort of people at the table with reason and move in the right direction. But so to me, it's not even a question of whether or not you should have voted for, like I said in the sermon on Sunday. I think it's lawful to not sin against your conscience and cast a vote where you believe it's unlawful for you. But I think that was unwise and an unforced strategic blunder. That's what I would say.
Well, it seems like with evangelicals, okay, so if you're Trump and you're the people who get elected, and you look out at the polling and you say, okay, evangelicals kind of abandoned us. It was like record low turnout. Are you going to be more or less inclined to say, hey, guys, come over here, let's talk? I think that's kind of obvious versus, hey, we're looking at it and we're saying these guys are willing to hear us out.
Yeah, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of how people work, right? So, for example, all of us pastor. And so if there's somebody that comes into the church, you have a very small minority, say it's like 2 people, that have this theological belief. They hold very, very tightly to this one theological belief. And it's within the realm of orthodoxy, say that. Would it be more strategic for that person to come to one of us and say, hey, what do you know about this thing? I hold this position. Have you ever interacted with this idea? What are your thoughts? Do you see the holes in it? How should I interact in the body of the church? Am I allowed to hold this? Are you okay with it? Like, I don't want to be divisive. I just want you to know I'm for you. We can be friends on this, but I'd really like to talk through this and, have a discussion, see if you can, how much have you thought about it? What your thoughts are, versus the person that's like, I'm not going to submit to anyone that does not hold this thing. And you could be very principled about it. And you could even be right. That's the thing. But are you going to win them? The answer is no. And so by saying either you play by my rules or I'm not playing at all, what's going to happen is it's worse than politicians will not listen to abolitionists. That will happen, but they'll also be seen as political opponents. Mm-hmm. And so not only will they not listen to them, but they will be seen as enemies,
well, they'll polarize,
which is far worse.
Polarizing and attacking is the strategic political maneuver when you have an enemy who has signaled to you clearly they're not going to support you no matter what, unless you agree with them on this thing. And you actually think, whether you're right or wrong about this, the calculation on the right was we actually can't win the election if we run really hard on abortion right now, because more Americans than not are really squishy on abortion, and they're wrong on it. So they were making a purely Machiavellian political, we've got to win women voters. Women, the female vote is fundamentally evil. They're going to fundamentally vote for evil things. And so Trump, think about it from a political standpoint, he's thinking there's no way we're going to win if we make the drum we beat harder than any other drum. Not the issue that Americans actually right now are most concerned about.
Like the economy.
Like the economy and immigration and things like that. Instead, because those are also issues that are going to permanently enshrine Democrats in power forever. What we're going to do is focus on this very unpopular issue. Notice that none of what I just said was a moral judgment on that, because abortion is evil. I'm just saying this is the political calculus.
You have to actually just look at what reality is.
And from a Christian perspective as well, I tweeted something to this effect earlier today as we record. In Psalm 37, one of the great themes of the psalm is not to fret yourselves at evildoers, not to give way to obsessive anger about them, not to give way to fretfulness about them. Yes, I see a man who is an evil man who seems to be set up and spreading like a great laurel tree, and he's taking over everything. And Lord, you've said that the meek will inherit the land. The meek will inherit the earth. Jesus didn't invent that, by the way. It's right out of Psalm 37. So what's happening? And the Lord says, one day you're going to look for them, and you're not going to find them. That tree will have fallen over and blown away. You won't discover it. The meek really will inherit the land. And when you look at an issue like abortion, as much as we hate this, one of the ways that God causes the righteous to inherit the land is by the wicked embracing self-destruction. So the left and the unrighteous today in our land, they've embraced a cult of death on every level, on the abortion issue, on transgenderism, on making themselves chemically infertile and castrating themselves, on putting compounds into our food and our medical system that make you infertile and destroy your hormone health. They've embraced globalist warmongering, death, all the way up and down. Whether you like it or not, one of the ways that God visits judgment on those wicked, such that the righteous inherit the land, is by them killing themselves, cutting off their own progeny, and destroying their bloodlines. So put this in your playbook, that one of the things that God might do, God might actually do this, is let them succeed in destroying their own bloodlines. And that's horrible. That is dark. But we have to reckon with that we're not like God. God is not a tame lion, right? He's the God who flooded the world and killed every man, woman, and child. God did that. He's the one who wrote Psalm 109. Go read it. He's the one who did that. He inspired that. So part of our problem is that we often fail to have a stomach for God's judgment. And I think that's a mistake. I think we need to have a stomach. Now, none of what I just said, someone's going to take that and twist it into saying, Brian is for the unrighteous killing their babies. Brian loves that. Oh, I don't. I hate. The righteous should look on and be saying to them, don't do it. There's freedom in Christ. You can have forgiveness of your sin. You can leave this death cult. You can stop trying to drink at your broken cistern that holds no water. You can have living water from the Lord. You can be the prodigal son that stops eating the pods that the pigs eat. And you can come and have a ring on your finger, and you can have a robe put on you by the Father. He's looking over the horizon. Like, we can say all of that.
And we have. Many hours outside of abortion clinics.
And then say at the same time, and yet, if you embrace death, death is what you will get. If you appeal to Tash is to whom you will go. So if you want to destroy your bloodline, there is a point where God will say, your will be done. And that will be a judgment. So these are difficult things. We ought not have like a giddiness over the unrighteous destroying their own children. But it's actually something to factor in to our understanding is reading God's national judgments as well. Because God delights, last thing, I know I've been going for a minute, but last thing is that you might say, well, that's the destruction of our whole nation. But God doesn't sweep away the righteous with the unrighteous. He doesn't do that. In fact, you could read Jim Hamilton's great book, God's Glory and Salvation Through Judgment, where he traces the, one way of reading the mega theme of Scripture, a biblical theology of the whole of Scripture would be that it is the theme of God getting his glory in saving his people in the very midst of judgments, like the very waters that flooded the earth carry the ark. The very waters that parted for the people to walk through crashed down and drowned the enemies of the people of God. You could go on and on and on and find instance, the ultimate, of course, being that it is in the very murder of the Son of God at the hands of the wicked, by which God destroys the wicked, crushes the head of Satan, and delivers his people from the ultimate enemy of sin, death, and hell. So we have to learn how to read God's glory and God's judgments and to do our duty well in them while not becoming fretful and anxious and giving way to like hair-pulling anxiety. Even when you see the wicked being extremely wicked, it's not fruitful to go there.
Well, I think this is actually somewhere where the right can win, because on the one hand, you have, like you said, the party of death and really a culture of death within the left.
Altogether.
Just cutting their bodies apart. It's the party of depression and suicide. Transgenderism leads to this, infertility, all of that. And then I think one of the things that's being championed on the right, and this is where the ethos pathos of an Elon Musk is so important, is that what are we championing? We're championing generational work. We're championing children. For all his faults, like Elon is a fan of like fertility in children, right? You can definitely, and we do disagree with some of the ways that he's gone about doing that.
Absolutely.
We think are wicked and evil. And yet we can also say, I think for America, there is hope in, again, bringing back natural families. You can actually not open your borders to the third world. You can just, this is going to shock everyone. You can have children.
The elites don't want you to know this, but you can get married and just have like 15 children and raise them in the fear and understanding of the Lord, build household economies, businesses, and take over a city. The elites don't want you to know this. This is an option. I have 7 kids. I've been, the ducks are free. I have 57 ducks.
The elites don't want you to know you can take the ducks home. Dan goes all the time and he takes the ducks home. This is what Dan knows. This is true.
It's a lot easier at the park, by the way, but
than in the swamps,
in the wild.
But if you think about families, the work that we're doing here in Ogden, it's fundamentally, I think, what Elon's talking about. It's an ethos pathos of excitement, of building, of a hopeful future. And I think, Dan, when you look at these sorts of things, it's so important that we're not blackpilling, that we're looking at this as, man, what an opportunity. I mean, we've been building for years in Ogden, but the election happens. I see Elon. I see what's going on. I said, if anybody can fix an organization, it's Elon. Like you saw what he bought Twitter. You remember the tweet, Dan? I think you were telling me about this, where somebody was like, well, why don't you just buy Twitter? And he was like, how much is it?
Yeah.
And then he goes and he buys Twitter, totally guts it. You've even got the meme lords are doing great right now.
Oh, man.
It's Elon in the Oval Office and he's carrying the sink out.
He's carrying the sink. Yeah, let that sink in. Because he did that at Twitter.
Yes.
He carried a sink into Twitter headquarters when he bought it.
He gutted it of all the leftist nonsense and garbage. Everybody who was like
80% of the people were fired.
And let's be real, that 80% was like white, retarded, liberal women.
Like, let's just be honest. Let's be honest about it. No organization needs 80% white, retarded, liberal women.
No, they do not.
It doesn't work. So the U.S. government right now is run by basically 3 types of people. One of them are people who genuinely love their country. They're competent. They work hard, and they're absolutely frustrated at the bureaucracy, the HR ladyism. These are the type of men that the Air Force has kicked out that find refuge in our church, that are on staff at New Christendom Press and everything. These are men, those type of men in the armed services and in the government. They exist. My dad was there for 40 years in the armed services and the government, working hard, competent man, good leader, loved his people, loves his nation, genuinely wanting to serve the nation. Those people exist. You have HR ladies who just want to niggle for power and destroy everything. And they have, time would fail. And then there are also armies of drones that are incompetent. They're paper pushers. They get nothing done. They're dead weights on the U.S. government, and we pay for all of them. And they have mastered the art of doing as little as possible through bureaucratic manipulation to keep their jobs and make a comfortable living. And the thing that gives me hope is that I actually do believe that if you gave Elon a free hand, he could eliminate a significant portion of those second two types of people.
Red meat is a staple of a healthy, protein-packed diet, but not all meat is created equal. That's why I buy my meat from Salt and Strings Butchery. Salt and Strings is owned and operated by my friends Quinn and Samantha Bible, and the meat they offer is raised, harvested, and processed exclusively in Southern Illinois. It's cut and packaged by my friends Quinn and Anthony, and not only is it the best meat I've ever had, well, all their meat is sourced from local farms that share our Christian values. Salt and Strings is now offering a beef and hog box that can be shipped directly to your door. The 15-pound beef box features 100% Black Angus beef and includes ribeyes, T-bones, sirloin, chuck roast, fajita meats, and ground beef. You can order your beef box today for just $259. They will send it directly to your door. The hog box is $239 and features premium Duroc pork, including 8 thick pork chops, one of my all-time favorites, pork steaks, cured and sliced bacon, ground pork, bratwurst, and breakfast sausage links. You can place your order today at saltandstrings.com or use the link in the show notes. And also be sure to follow Salt and Strings on Instagram. We'll also include the link in the show notes. Want to start reading the Puritans but don't know where to begin? Puritan Treasures for Today from Reformation Heritage Books makes the riches of these godly writers of old accessible for the modern reader. With updated language and helpful introductions, these classic works from John Owen, Jeremiah Burroughs, and more are the perfect starting point for the curious reader. Learn more about the Puritan Treasures for Today at heritagebooks.org/Puritan Treasures. Also, follow the link in the show notes to get 10% off with the code HARDMEN. Today's episode is sponsored by Premier Body Armor, your top choice for safeguarding your family. What sets them apart? Well, Premier isn't here to convince you to wear a plate carrier around town. Nope. They're focused on innovating armor right into your normal everyday life. Think bulletproof laptop case or lightweight armor insert that fits into your favorite bag and stops most handgun, shotgun, and even rifle ammunition. Unlike much of the tactical industry, choosing Premier Body Armor not only ensures that you're getting amazing armor, but you'll be doing business with a family-owned Christian company. Visit PremierBodyArmor.com today and use promo code KINGSHALL for 10% off your order today. Got questions? Reach out to customer service or send their president an email directly at alex@PremierBodyArmor.com and you can speak to him yourself. Don't wait to invest your family's security, but reach out today to Premier Body Armor. Don't carry a bag? No worries. How about a moisture-wicking athletic t-shirt with minimalist and lightweight soft armor panels built in? Check the link in the show notes or visit PremierBodyArmor.com today. Well, and if you look at, and this is what I want to ask Dan, if you look at the age of exploration, age of discovery, Portugal is the first nation to kick this off. Very small, under 2 million people. They're building, literally, you can read this. It's for Christendom. They see themselves as a type of crusader. It's largely economic. They're being strangled by the Muslim hold on trade across, the middle of Africa and the Mediterranean. And so they said, we need to find another route. And so these guys, they would send out 300 ships at a time. They might lose 200. And then, Henry the Navigator and others would say, but we're going to keep going. We're going to keep charting Africa and we're going to send Vasco da Gama and we are going to find an alternate trade route. And at that time, even reading the stories, you're like, given the technology they had, how did they do that?
They were setting up these stone statues the furthest they would get so that you could go and find, there's one of their statues on the coastland. This is how far we've gotten.
Yes.
They're men jumping off the edge into abyss, knowing the odds of death are 40 to 60%. From scurvy to shipwrecks to shipworms eating their ship out from under them.
This is the voyage of the Dawn Treader, right?
That's what it is.
But it is this spirit that I think Elon understands. Mm-hmm. So what does Portugal do? They take all this wild risk for the glory of God. And then Portugal becomes the world's first global empire. And you see what that nation did. And you're like, they've touched so many parts of the world, brought Christ to those parts of the world as well. So Dan, if we're looking at a hopeful golden age, I was a long time wondering, like, why does Elon care about Mars and SpaceX and EVs? Like, why is he so? He is an innovator.
Yeah.
Like if you read Peter Thiel's 0 to 1, Elon is an innovator, and I think we need that in our country right now. But do you agree? Why do you think this would be so pivotal to have this ethos pathos of adventure exploration?
Yeah, I think one thing that we're noticing as a mega theme is that those who hate wisdom love death. You know, going back to what you were talking about, the judgment of the wicked. Mm-hmm. But then also noticing that there is I don't know if it's natural law or just general equity or whatever of wisdom that we're noticing in a lot of these competent men that are rising up. But you nailed it with the multiplier, which is courageous innovation and exploration. People that know how to get things done. The bureaucratic, the 30% or more that you described, the drones, like those are also the people that were ruling. They just did the minimum that they needed to do to get elected without rocking any boats. And then they're in the office, whatever office they're holding, whatever elected office they're holding. And then they have all the side deals to make sure that they've got a cush life. Yep. And they just push paper, so you have the same thing. And so men like Elon, I'm sure, are terrifying to those sorts of people. Men like Trump are terrifying to those sorts of people because those are the guys who get things done. Like the story that Brian read about Trump earlier and all of the odds that he overcame, like over leveraging all of his assets and debt, economic downturn, all of those things. And he's like, hey, we just got to get it done. We just got to figure out how to get out of this. And he ends up on top. Same thing with Elon. There was a story that I had read a long time ago in the beginning of SpaceX. They were trying to figure out this SpaceX rocket, trying to get it to go. He was running out of money. And he needed a fuselage or some part. You'll have to look it up online. I'm going to butcher it, but he found it. He found an old fuselage on the side of the road in Florida, outside of NASA, and he's like, "Hey, that's exactly what we need." And so he bought it for like pennies on the dollar, hooks it up into his rocket, and that's what they use. He just gets stuff done, and that's what you need. Portuguese. Brazilians still speak Portuguese because of that's a long ways away, long time ago.
Yeah.
And so never underestimate what a determined man can get done. And it doesn't take many, right, Eric?
It doesn't.
I mean, the population of Portugal is tiny.
Yeah, under 2 million.
And by the way, because God tells the best stories, he loves the underdog story. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna ascend to the right hand of the Father, essentially be crowned as king of the cosmos. And I'm gonna start my kingdom with 200 people. That's what I'm gonna start with. And has taken over the world.
Yeah, I mean,
his kingdom keeps swallowing the earth.
It's so interesting, and we'll talk about this as a quick teaser for upcoming episode, but St. Patrick and the Irish saved Western civilization. These like backwoods.
Oh, yes.
I mean, ruffians, my people. One thing I do want to point out too, I just saw this, it's a couple hours old from Elon Musk. It's a picture of the counties in America, which are like 99% red.
Is it the red?
And he said, they say red light helps you sleep better.
It was so good. It's so good. Real quick, to the age of exploration.
Yes.
To the courage. Like it all comes together. This is we've talked a lot about this.
Yeah.
In, not just on the air, but ourselves in church and leadership of many different things, is that authority flows to those who take responsibility competently. And often you look at the men who do take responsibility competently, they also, a lot of the time, they tend to have a maverick streak in them where they want to go and do something nobody's ever done. And people love to line up against such men and say, you can't do that. Nobody can do that. No, that's not the way it's done. That's not the received wisdom. In fact, Elon, the way that you send a rocket to space is this, and this. And it's really hard, and you're never going to be able to get this thing off the ground. And Elon goes, yeah, that's great, but what if we just did this instead? And then he slashes like 40% of the process, completely reconfigures the entire thing, fails about 50 times, almost loses it all, risks his personal reputation and a significant portion of his wealth. And then it's like, they did it. Those sons of God, they did it. They did it. They did it. And what bothers me and I talked about this at our last conference, but this has come to really eat at me, is the failure of competence amongst Christian culture, the failure to develop elites.
Well, you have
in
Christian
every
leaders
industry.
who are actually saying that ambition is bad.
Why do you have Elon Musk and these guys leading the coalition and doing these great things? And why do we have so few truly competent, glorious Christian men building great businesses, daring it all, risking it, taking responsibility, seeing authority and power flow to them? And I just want to say, like, one of the great projects of this Ogden borough and New Christendom Press is it's not just about building a church. One church is great. It can change a lot. But it's about building men who will go and be the kind of men that will do things we never would have predicted they could have. Going and building men, it just takes one. It just takes one. If out of our school, over some we see a lot of great fruit and competence and glory and normal stuff, and that's great. Love that too. You love all the layers of the hierarchy. But one man goes and starts one business or two businesses or three businesses or starts a movement. And then you start to see the power that can, the way that can change history, that kind of courage and competence. And it just fires me up to not only continue rejecting the hatred of ambition and the
self-loathing,
embracing of mediocrity as a virtue. Can you imagine telling the Apostle Paul that followers of him, it would a couple thousand years later, that they would basically be enshrining mediocrity as a virtue? When Paul is like, I beat my body into submission to make it obey the Lord Jesus Christ, and basically, humanly speaking, be one of the most powerful forces for the transformation of the world through the Christian faith, because he gave it all every day of his life.
Even to say, as Paul did, by the grace of God, but he said, I worked harder than
them all. That's an Elon. Paul and Elon, they're kind of cut from the same mold in a lot of ways. And I guess the call to action here, like what we're looking for is, be that kind of man. If you're a 5-talent man, turn the most profit you can off your 5 talents. If you're 1 talent, turn the most profit you can off that 1 talent. If you're a 100-talent guy, you had better go and turn 100. You had better go and make it. Don't bury that. Don't buy the lie. And the other thing is, don't think that just ecclesiastical pursuits are the only meaningful types of pursuits. Go and start businesses. Go and become a great statesman. Go become a great judge. Like aim high and aim broadly. This is one of the themes in the book Ben and I wrote for Haunted Cosmos, is that God made this great, big, interesting, fascinating world. And it's men who take like an autistic level of obsession with some one aspect of it, like Elon could probably tell you everything about lithium batteries and figuring out how to optimize them to make his EV empire, whatever it is. And take that level of obsession, like there's glory there that God hid and he meant for it to be searched out, to have that glory of kings who find a thing out.
You need a little bit of audacity.
Yeah.
And a lot of courage.
Yeah.
And one example comes to mind, and I don't want this to be self-congratulatory because it's about us, kind of. It's really, a lot of this was led by Brian with our school. I think it was really interesting you brought up the school, because we had this principle, like, we need to educate our kids Christianly. We need to do this really well. It helps produce a culture and a people and an institution that has gravity to keep our kids here. Lots of benefits. But one of the biggest hangups we encountered was like, well, but tuition is so expensive. You remember early on, we were looking at tuition models and we're like, we can't afford to send our own kids to the school that we start. And I imagine it was you, probably at some meeting, where you just all of a sudden said, like, but why can we just not charge tuition at all? Mm-hmm. It's like, that's insane. We tell people that idea still, that members of the church that tithe in good standing, they don't pay tuition. They get a full scholarship,
and we don't accept non-members.
And we don't accept non-members. so I mean, that's how we do the school. There's no tuition. Uh-huh. And when we tell people that, I remember Headmaster Love was talking to another local private school headmaster, and he told him that idea. And this other guy is like, yeah, good luck with that.
That's not going to work.
That's not going to work.
You know how many people have told us that won't work? And I'm like, well, we're 4 years in. It does. So I'm sorry to disappoint you that we didn't fail. But it's kind of like Elon when people tell him, you can't land the rocket again and reuse it. Are you crazy? He's like, what if I did though?
It's really interesting because you get guys that are more entrepreneurial in their disposition. They start seeing opportunities everywhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's crazy. Once that triggers, once you take a risk, once you see an opportunity and you're like, no, I'm gonna be courageous and I'm gonna go for it. And you actually do that, all of a sudden this world of opportunity opens before you and you're like, how does no one else see this? It's because legitimately no one else sees it or very few people see it. Yeah. And those that do see it don't have the courage or the audacity to actually do something about it. Yeah. And so that's really another thing that's needed within that striving for excellence. It's like, how do you actually be the 10 talent guy or the 5 talent guy and go out and double your returns? I mean, that's crazy. That's really good returns. I'm sure Joe Garrissey would be excited if you doubled your money like that.
Let's go.
But I mean, that takes some risk and audacity and just having a mind that sees opportunities. And we do get a lot of emails from guys, especially after the business series, where they're like, I want to start a business. What's a good opportunity? I'm like, my guy, I mean, time would fail to tell you of all the opportunities, but it's irrelevant. You have to see the opportunity. You have to take the risk. You have to know your strengths and weaknesses. Mm-hmm. You have to have the eyes for it. I can't just give you ideas. You have to have them.
Yeah.
So that's something that should be defining within Christianity is seeing opportunity. We're going to go across the ocean and find another way to India for trade and to circumvent the Muslims so that we can, flank them. That's a great idea. It's audacious and I think crazy and risky, and they did it.
And size-wise, the other factor is looking at the size. Portugal could have said we're too small to ever accomplish something like this. And again, to absolutely toot our own horns, because I'm all about that. I'm just kidding.
Ben, I wanted to talk to you about something. I'm concerned about you.
What are you concerned about?
Every time I see you, you have more and more Indigo Sundries products. I feel like you're overdoing it.
Dude, give me one example.
Dude, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Do you see, where did you even get this from?
What's the problem with having some soap on hand?
Ben, we're at work right now. There's
what, you don't want to smoke it at work?
There's going to be no situation where you need Indigo Sundry soap at work.
Have you ever gotten sweaty in this basement?
Dude, yes. Every time we're filming, I look at you and I go, he's so handsome.
Well then you're gonna need some soap so that you don't smell as bad.
Do you see what's happening to you? How are you even? Are there do you have fairies that give you this?
Dude, what are you talking about?
Have you partnered with the Fae?
No, I'm a stone cold Christian who likes soap.
Dude, wait. Is that calendula?
Oh, not so mad about it now, are you?
They make liquid soap now?
You didn't know that?
Dude, I didn't know that. Well, they're obviously
they're a sponsor of the show. You should know that.
I have duties and responsibilities. Not all of us can just be Indigo Sundry Maxing all the time.
Okay, well, since you didn't know that, I'm assuming you also didn't know that if you use their subscription plan, you'll get 10% off of your order.
10% off?
10% off.
Of their already great prices?
I'm telling you.
Are you kidding me?
But I think one of the things was, okay, you see a problem. The Christian version of legacy media sucks. I'm sick and tired of the Gospel Coalition, these people running the show and controlling the narrative. And so what do we do? Do we just say, well, that's too bad, I hope somebody does something? Or you say, in this amazing, pristine, semi-moldy sometimes, semi-flooded sometimes basement of the church,
never the right temperature.
Never the right temperature. There's not
so cold.
HVAC in the offices. But we're going to start a media company. And
did we do?
We did that.
In that basement?
In this basement, actually.
This one?
Yes.
This one, the one you described.
But and what my hope is with it, honestly, is to inspire other people that, just like Elon. I remember thinking when he said, I'm going to buy Twitter and we're going to change it. I was like, you can't just buy Twitter. And Elon was like, yeah, I think you can just buy Twitter.
I can.
I can just do that thing to inspire people to build in other places. But I think there's also people who are listening to the show. There's people who have moved here and there's people who are going to move here. And so to those people, I would just want to say, if you're a builder, if you're that guy, we want you. We want to talk to you.
Yeah.
And we have a call for you. And it goes something like this, Dan. Men wanted for Hazardous Journey. low wages, bitter cold, long hours of complete darkness, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in event of success. Like, men want those kind of calls, and we want to call you to that work.
Yeah, you guys should read the book Endurance, the William Shackleton.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
I thought Eric just came up with that just now. I did. You did. It's amazing.
I did.
Dude, that's
And-
really good.
And tons of glory. I think that's the other thing, that if you look around, what do you see in the young men? If we're talking about speaking to men on the Christian right, there's malaise. They don't have a mission. They don't know what their life is for. And so breathing that life from scripture and from reading the book of nature into these guys, inspiring them with stories. Look, this is the thing that drives me crazy is you get all these Christian leaders who are like pietists and, they're purity spiraling and they're like, oh, Donald Trump, he's not perfect, blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at all of this and I'm like, this is a great man. I mean, by all accounts, he's not perfect, but by all accounts, he is a great man. He has accomplished more in my lifetime than I thought any man could do. And now you've got other great men around him. And I think for Christians, instead of purity spiraling, this should inspire you, right? This should be an inspirational story that gets you fired up and you say, you know what? Maybe I can't change everything in the world, but what is Jordan Peterson? I always go back to this. He said the first place to start is look around you in your world. You might be a waiter at a restaurant and you say, where is responsibility being abdicated?
Yep.
And where could I take responsibility where no one else will? And you start there and you start seeing what Brian said, where authority just starts flowing. And you're like, well, the more I have authority, the more I have power to change this bad circumstance.
You'll be the right-hand man of that restaurant if you do that competently. You'll be the right-hand man of that business and organization if you do that competently. If it's a good one, if it's a restaurant or a business or a church or a place worth being, and you take a responsibility like that competently, not only will you succeed in your current role, you will stand before kings.
Yes.
You'll stand before kings. Even if you're not brilliant or a genius or the best at everything or omnicompetent or a Renaissance man, if you do that to the best of your ability with what God has put before you and in your hand, because here's the thing, God tailor-made the things in front of you for the strengths that he put in front of your hand. Because he always gives us an opportunity to be what we were supposed to be. If he called you and put you in a place, trust me, and he gave you the vocations and duties and commands he did, there is opportunity to obey all of those commands somewhere in your life.
Yeah, and one of the things that you have to protect yourself against is that when you see somebody else building, somebody else taking responsibility, somebody else succeeding, is to not envy them to the point where you become bitter at them and divide.
You start making excuses.
Yeah, you start
they
making
just had
excuses.
better opportunities.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we all have personal temptations. I mean, I look at Brian and he sings or he preaches or whatever. I'm like, well, of course. I mean, like, the guy's got so much natural talent. I mean, he's so much farther ahead.
He's French.
He's better looking. I mean, he's got all of his hair.
I'm blushing right now. I'm going to leave.
And so the temptation is to say, well, Brian has it easy. I hate Brian. Instead of saying,
I'm a very hateable guy.
Hey,
let's be honest.
I'm super happy for Brian, and I'm glad he's on my team. And that's the disposition we should have towards everyone else. So when we see other media companies having success, you know what our attitude is? This is a secret because you can also do this. God made a world where you can say, I'm glad for those brothers. I pray for their success. I'm glad I'm on their team.
Yep.
That's what you can do. When you see other men succeed, you should celebrate their success and not hate them for it. Mm-hmm. And so in your midst of looking at opportunities, there are going to be people that are ahead of you. And then remember that there are also people that are going to be behind you. And so don't despise humble beginnings. Mm-hmm. Don't despise younger men that have ambition. In fact, here's a novel idea. You should help them and mentor them and take them under your wing and show them, here's what I've learned. And here's some pitfalls and mistakes to avoid, and help them build too. And maybe, just maybe, you will find that you have a lot of friends and you build your own coalitions and you can actually move more than you could alone.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember, and this would be an encouragement especially for older pastors, platform leaders, older guys in the different versions of conservative movements. But Proverbs 20:29 says, the glory of young men is their strength, but the splendor of old men is their gray hair. Just to point back to this for, as we wrap things up and close, Donald Trump could have said, man, these guys on the right, what's their problem? They seem really like gung-ho. I'm going to try and geld them. But he didn't do that. He said, I think there's something going on here. And again, to the proverb, we need multi-generational work together. You need young men with strength working with the old guy who says, hey, I've got some wisdom. Let me help, put some reins on this.
Yeah, Trump is like, I better develop some better dance moves. I'm going to introduce a golf swing into my dance moves, and Barron is going to take over as my meme
Bryson.
lord. Yeah.
Where's Bryson? Get Bryson DeChambeau up here. I know he's here. Get him on the stage.
Is he hitting balls right now? I think he's hitting balls. We're going to get him. We're going to get him. He's coming.
He's coming.
He like sheepishly walks on the stage.
Bryson DeChambeau's like, I'm not prepared for this. Give him a few words, Bryson. What do you have to say to the people?
Yeah, he's telling everybody to get up there.
Can you imagine like being Bryson DeChambeau? He's like, I'm a golfer. And he's standing on like the biggest platform literally in the entire world.
I also think this with Trump this is his victory speech. One thing that I noted was he was not self-congratulatory.
Yeah.
I think the events that have happened to him have genuinely humbled him. They've caused him to rely on other people. And he really was that night about, Dana White, get up here. And, JD, come up here. I want you to say
willing to share
something.
the microphone?
Yes.
I mean, that's a lesson that we could all learn probably.
It was not, just tooting the own horn. Yeah, I don't know why you guys talk so much.
Dude, I don't know why you always...
As I'm talking, Dan's like, yeah, we could share the mic.
I thought it was more subtle than that, but maybe
Nah,
not.
dude.
Yeah, it's good to have lots of competent guys. Dan, I do want to give you the microphone due to my great humility to close us out with a charge. So I think this is like building, inspiring people. Some of you come to Ogden. There's a lot of things you could say, but I'm giving you the honors of charging us.
Hear it.
Thank you so much. Here's what I'd say. Men of the West, the time is now to build what was taken from us, what was destroyed, and to build something that's even better. And so right now, there are a few things that you need to do. First, you need to repent. Repent of all of the sins that are holding you back. Repent of our folly. Repent of our lackadaisical attitude or a slothfulness towards all of the difficulties that we've encountered. Instead of actually fighting through them, we've decided that we are going to retreat. And now is not the time to retreat. Now is the time to press forward. And the first step is repentance. Get your life in order, get your family in order, and integrate yourself into a good community where you can actually build together. The second thing is be men who take risks, because without anything risked, nothing is earned. And so now is the time to look for opportunities and to take risks, measured risks. And thirdly, I want you to find competent men to surround yourselves with, particularly older men who have fought the battles that you're looking at right now. They fought them well and with wisdom. And those men should be able to help you in your mission to take risk, to take dominion, and to take this country for the Lord Jesus Christ. And the other thing is, if you want to hear more about that, I think we'll be releasing something soon about our conference in 2025 that will be along those lines and along those themes. And so be looking for more information about that.
Amen. Pastor Nalente.